Welcome to the Padres Hot Tub, everybody. Craig Elsten, Chris Reed, Raphie Cantor. Even when they don't hear the music, they do dorky dances.
I told you, Craig, I play it in my head before we start recording every single time. It is a jam. It'll never not be a jam, even when it's not playing.
You know, it's amazing. Bobby's theme song for us is so good that it's still a jam at 1.25x. In fact, I'd argue it's maybe a slightly better jam at 1.25x. It still plays at 1.5. It's still fine. It's a little caffeinated at 2x. But however you enjoy the podcast, if you are listening, we thank you for being here. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you heard it at 1x, I guess you can speed up YouTube videos too.
You sure can.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to start doing that now too, because I always get freaked out when I hear it back at regular speed now, because I'm a 1.25 guy. That's just where I am. I pep it up a little bit and I get through the work a little bit faster.
Love it.
So
I also should note for our YouTube commentators that want me to turn off my camera. Never gonna do it. This is what I do for money. I've been doing this for money for a decade. This face, it's never changing.
Appreciate that. All right, we're going to talk about pitching in the bulk of the episode, and we're going to try and put some numbers up and figure out if we can solve an equation to allow the Padres to finish next season. In other words, can we conjure up enough innings for the San Diego Padres starting rotation? We have potentially some breaking news, some bombshell news from Mr. Reed. We'll sort through that. We need to sort through some fallout from Bob Melvin as well, and we'll do that up top. But first, some quick housekeeping. Again, if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. If you're watching this video, please like it. Please subscribe. We definitely appreciate that. Approaching 1,000 followers, continue to grow. Big ups to Rafe for the latest Pods Above replacement video on the most unclutched team ever. Great video. Super well done. You've gotten a lot of ups for it, but that came out after the last full show. So we teased it last time, but absolutely worth the watch if you haven't gone back to see that. Please check it out. And when you're there, give it a like, give it a subscribe, share it to your friends, so on and so forth. That's how the algorithm finds its rhythm. We had another fun thing for our patrons last week, being that it's the off season and we don't have Padres teams to do watch parties for and have Tevin ruin them. We instead did a movie watch party this past week, and Tevin didn't ruin it at all. He didn't actually participate, so who knows? Maybe he would have been jumping in telling us that actually Cameron Crowe is terrible at things for reasons and whatnot, and the 14-year contract he signed was a huge mistake. I don't know. But what we did instead was we talked about Cameron Crowe's 1989 film, Say Anything. We all watched it together. We clicked play, and then we put up the watch party. That's one episode down, even on the free feed. I mention it not only because we had a lot of fun, but because our patrons are going to have a chance in the next week to pick our next movie that we will do. The first one was definitely, I think, struck because of the whole situation of me having watched it so much and not you guys not having watched it. But we're going to have the patrons pick on the next flick. So how can you be part of our fun? Patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. If you do enjoy this show and you're a free patron, consider supporting the show by becoming a Patreon member, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. I'll just throw it out there. Patrons had the opportunity to go to the U.S. Women's National Team this weekend because a couple tickets dropped in my lap, and I dropped them in the Discord's lap and said, hey, who wants to go? First come, first serve. Boom. It was a $5 patron who picked those up. Padre Poppy sat in the 100 section, sat in some great seats to check out U.S. women's team thumping Colombia yesterday 3-0. So, hey, things happen. Padre tickets come all the time. All the fun, different things we have, all the different benefits. Check them out. Find out for yourself. Patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. Membership can be as low as $5 a month. It's a bargain. Okay. We did 2 episodes last week, essentially on Bob Melvin leaving. So there's a lot of ground that we've covered that I definitely don't want to repeat and recover. Since those episodes came out, some reporting came out from our Padres reporters, Kevin Acee and Dennis Lin, much of which I would describe as the Padres front office trying to put their spin on things and make sure that if you're going to be out there ripping everybody, to know, hey, Bob wasn't all he was cracked up to be. There might have been some problems here with old Bob. And if you knew more, you might not be as excited at us, and you might be more thinking that we did the right thing. I shared some of those clips with you guys in our Discord, and just kind of going through it real quick, because then I had a couple people, one in particular, but you know how X is, especially more than Twitter. Twitter was bad, X is worse. And so people just like, no, Bob Melvin is just the worst manager. You don't understand. Bob Melvin was a terrible manager who had a terrible relationship with the front office, and we should be thrilled that he's gone. He just couldn't work here. And the thing that was pushed at me was the reduced version of Bob Melvin denied analytics to his team. He would be offered analytics and he would not let the information get to his team. He would not let the analytics people talk to the players. He would not allow it. He was denying them the information that they needed to win games. The stuff that we were yelling about in the season at the beginning, in the middle, and the end, and everywhere in between. Saying, why aren't they better prepared? Why don't they? Do they have all the info? Are they the worst analytics department? So Kevin Acee put out a couple of 3 different articles. Dennis Lin did a mailbag where he went through some things. I'm just going to kind of go through this real quick. The first 2 are Acee. The second one is Lin. Okay. Acee. Members of the front office have expressed frustration at what they perceive as Melvin often balking at their input. This pushback, people involved contend, has only increased as the tensions between Melvin and Preller have escalated. This was from a piece written the week before they let him go. Or the one, like he did the big thing solving the AJ Melvin rift. Melvin, for 10 plus seasons, managed the A's, one of MLB's most analytics-driven organizations, and was able to coexist with a stringent front office. The difference here, people familiar with the back and forth between the parties said, could largely be in the type of information Melvin receives. Again, Acee. By the end of 22 and throughout 23, there was a perception among those in baseball operations that Melvin did not want input. Those people felt there was at times virtually no collaboration between the manager and certain members of his staff and those in player evaluation and analytics. Some close to Melvin indicated at the time there was a difference of opinion on the value of the input being provided. Okay, so from those 2, before I get to the Lin part of this, and then another thing from the outside that I thought might help unlock it. Just the thoughts there from what Acee is putting, that, okay, what you're missing is we were trying to offer stuff to Bob Melvin, and Bob Melvin was saying no, and or his staff was saying no. How do you guys take that at the value at which it was presented?
I take it as what you introduced to that, which is the front office putting their spin on the situation. That was why when you had texted those screenshots to us, I was like, are these all coming from Acee, or are these all, or some of these Lin and everything? And the fact that these 2 are coming from Acee, it's okay. This is Acee the mouthpiece again. You know what I mean? We've seen many different iterations of Kevin this year, and I will continue to shout out his newsletter. It's fantastic in-season stuff. And I think one of the criticisms he's faced before has been being a mouthpiece for certain people of the organization. It was Ron Fowler for a certain amount of time. And then, it has shifted and morphed, and now it's the front office that are giving him his spin. And of course he's going to report what is being told to him. I don't put a ton of stock into this narrative that's being spun of like, if you only knew, because I don't think that was any reporting that we had gotten from Melvin, who had a serious track record as a manager before this, that he was uncollaborative or unwilling to work with front offices. So I also think, again, like, they're going to benefit a lot from this narrative being out there. So I'm always going to take it with a much bigger grain of salt. So no, I don't put a lot of stock into it.
We're going to talk a lot about spin, and basically all the screenshots you shared have like agendas behind them that are opaque and hard to get at. It comes down to the reporting that we've heard all along, that these dudes didn't like each other, or like styles, habits, work-life balance habits. And that's what I think it comes down to. So the finger pointing that has existed for the last half of the season and coming out of Bob Melvin's departure, like, it all just feels like noise. And I don't want to get too into it. I want that noise to go away. And I'm hoping that, I would like to see it not exist at all, because it's not the first time. We've heard about Padres players having problems adopting analytics. A certain first baseman famously, whether through stubbornness or bad information, refused to do it. So it's not a new story in Padres land that analytics isn't being used to the best that the team could use it.
I want to go back to the second Acee and to the second half of it, because I think it's more getting to the heart of the matter, and also to what you're speaking about, Chris. And I'm just quoting from Acee's piece one more time. Preller runs on input and collaboration. His desire for information is seemingly insatiable. He surrounds himself with advisors, and they're liable to talk all hours of the day. It's not all that rare for someone to get a text or call from Preller at 3 a.m. and then again at 6:30 a.m. The topic of conversation may be a trade that's about to happen or could happen, or about a certain player's need to work on one thing or another. Preller wants that from everyone around him, and had to accept that there were certain hours and topics that Melvin, who spent 12 hours a day at the ballpark, was not interested in engaging. Yeah. Like, if I'm at the ballpark at noon and I'm there till midnight, and then I get home and I've finally gone to bed, and then my boss is pinging me at 3 and at 6 again, like, and meanwhile, Preller's just like, this motherfucker's left me on red for 6 hours.
This is the part of the article where that's why I kind of was like, Acee's running into mouthpiece territory again. Quote, Preller runs on input and collaboration. That all literally runs counter to every single piece of reporting, including Acee's own reporting, like, of the last, like, from before Bob Melvin was manager, from like the 2021 Lynn Rosenthal piece that spoke of the toxic work culture. Like, it's completely counter to that. And I love the idea of, like, what has AJ been doing in those 3 hours, by the way? Is that when he sleeps, or is that when he, like, really gets his best work done?
Or is that when the basketball game is? Like, maybe the pickup game's at 4:30. So, like, he texted at 3, then he went and he got his sneakers, he warmed up, he played in the game, he came back, he toweled off, still hasn't answered, another text or call, maybe I'll call this time. It's like, dude, no, I worked 12 hours, we're on the road, I just fell asleep at 2 a.m. Like, I'm 61.
That's it. He's a 61-year-old dude who's been in the league for friggin' 40 years. Like, come on. He does, and maybe that's where the micromanage thing. Maybe it's not AJ trying to make decisions for his manager. Maybe it's just him bombarding him with information in a way that's like, dude, you hired me. Let me do my job. I did find it interesting that, and I want to know where this was on the timeline. AJ Preller famously threw Kevin Acee under the bus in the past couple weeks.
Right.
He said he was not credible.
Correct.
Well, yeah. Lin, they've had their thing, but he said it's not credible, which, if you say that about a reporter, you're basically, throwing a lethal insult at them as he can. I'm doing that to my child. It's not a gesture of ancient Italian curse or anything. Like that's the worst thing you can say about a reporter is that he's not credible. That strikes to the heart of his job. That's like saying AJ Preller doesn't know what a good swing looks like, So I did listen to Hot Lava this past week for the first time in quite a while, and Acee brought that up, said that he called him out on that. So we'll see if the tone of the reporting changes over the coming offseason. It's the tone of the press conference that AJ took certainly seemed to be different than what we have seen in the past. And that goes to the next thing we're going to look at in the bottom right screenshot, Craig. I don't want to.
Well, so, okay. Now, I just want to contrast this, and this isn't necessarily a kill Acee segment, although there's going to be a piece I'm going to kill him on a little bit later. This is his reporting, but it does surely seem like maybe his reaction wasn't to get a little bit tougher. Maybe his reaction was to get 6 or 7 quotes from, what was Trump's fake press, John Barron or whatever,
Oh yeah.
It's John Barron to call, hey, no. Actually, here's the real scoop. No. So it seemed to go the other way. Dennis, in his last mailbag, the very first thing at the top is a big question mark on Preller's credibility. That's the first question asked and answered in the mailbag was like, does AJ Preller even have credibility? And the answer was kind of like, well, doesn't really look good right now. And basically lays out all of he said that all of this was BS and then look what happened. So yeah, not a great look for you, AJ Preller. So, it was a little victory lap for Dennis. That's fine. Okay. But another big part of the same mailbag was what about Melvin's culpability in this? Okay. And here's where he got into the issue of analytics and Melvin. All right. This is now from Lin. Preller in recent years has added to his research and development department by hiring from, among other places, Fangraphs, Tampa Bay, and Cleveland. The Padres will soon open a pitching lab at Point Loma Nazarene. Current and former staffers have said the amount and quality of in-game information is more than sufficient and not nearly as archaic as some outsiders perceive. According to some team members, Melvin at time took issue with the type of information he was receiving or how it was being presented. Okay, so just pausing there for a second, I feel like that lines up with what Acee was reporting as well.
Front office presented at 3 a.m. that Jake Cronenworth isn't trying to put the ball into the left side of the field anymore.
Right, yeah. However it was, whether they're giving him, giant books filled with crayon or, etch-a-sketches, every time it's an etch-a-sketch exactly lined up to the intricate plan, and then they hand it to him and it's like, it just shook, you assholes. I never get it right from you. Whatever it is, somehow the methodology was an issue. And it seems to me like it could have been an intrusive methodology from the front office that Bob Melvin was taking issue with. The second paragraph of what Lin writes is, still, those who know and work with Preller say he continues to run a more scout-driven organization than most. Many of Preller's most trusted advisors are executive with relatively traditional scouting backgrounds, and the Padres, with a top-heavy payroll and more future financial commitments than any other team, continue to lean heavily on their scouts when debating and deciding which players to acquire or shed. Outside of games, the overall influence of the analytics department likely remains limited when compared with many organizations. All right, so I just wanted to add that to get back to my favorite way to analyze something when you have incomplete information, which is Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is the most likely to be true. Is it more likely that Bob Melvin was embracing of analytics for 10 years in Oakland with a GM who's known to be, at least somewhat intrusive in Billy Beane, and agreed to take the job in San Francisco, which is the second most analytically driven organization, only to Tampa Bay, in the entire league, has the most coaches, and is going to be the most intrusive with their analytics and their information. But in between those two places, for 2 years, he turned into an old hard ass who said, keep that analytics away from me and away from my clubhouse and my coaching staff. Is that more likely, or is it more likely that he actually embraces analytics and wants it, but wants it done in a functional and coherent way, which occurred somehow in Oakland and is likely to occur in San Francisco, which is what he's running to, and what he's running away from is the guy who's texting him at 3 when he gets into the hotel room at 1:30 after he didn't get anything from him for 12 hours while he was at the ballpark. Like, which is the more likely of the two scenarios? I'll let you, the viewer/listener, decide. For me, it's that Bob Melvin is looking forward to being in a more professionally run organization in San Francisco, and that's what he's been coveting, in addition to his, long-standing San Francisco sports roots and all the shit that Andrew Baggerly's writing about this week. Like, it's that he just wants to get away from the chaos of what he's dealt with the last 2 years.
Yeah. Again, to further emphasize the point that you're making, Craig, Farhan Zaidi is descended from the Billy Bean, I guess not coaching tree, GM tree, like whatever you want to say. Like, it's the same school of philosophy that was happening in Oakland. That's where they met, for God's sake. So, I mean, again, we'll let the viewer decide. I have a theory that I want to get to, but Craig, you had pulled some quotes from Joe Madden, which I think will speak to what I want to say, which I think dives into this dynamic between manager and front office that I want to explore.
Precisely. And hey, video folks on the YouTube, maybe I assume you're seeing all these quotes as well. So, so this is from Ken Rosenthal. Jason Stark. He did an interview with Joe Madden on The Athletic that ran like 4 days ago. Joe Madden, who since leaving the Angels hasn't had another baseball job, but he wrote a book in which, after he wrote it, everyone's like, well, he's never going to work in baseball again. And now Joe Madden would like to tell you that, yes, he'd like to work in baseball again in some capacity, but he'd like to do it like his way. And in particular, one of the areas that Joe Madden had a big issue with was communication of analytics and analytically driven information from the front office to the team. All right. Now, he has since said, like, he wants to work for an organization that understands kind of the right way to do this. And here's how he talked about it. Okay, these are Joe Madden's quotes now. He said, at the end of the day, and he's talking about his coaching staff, you're in charge of the hitters, meaning his hitting coach. This dude is in charge of the pitchers, the pitching coach. This guy's got defense. So if you have anything to say about any of those things, you go to the department head and let him bring it to the player. And I want that done earlier in the day. I want fewer people in the clubhouse. I want the clubhouse to be the player's domain. And yes, I want all kinds of input, but I want nobody in my office an hour before the game. I don't want that. I don't think that's appropriate because I've got to get my stuff together. Now, if in fact you don't want the manager to get his stuff together and you want to tell the manager what his stuff is, that's a different story. And I can't work under those circumstances. I want your input. I want collaboration. I want all the intel you want to give me. I want all that. And I promise you, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I am. So he's talking about a world where, yeah, there's all this information, but instead of it going through the chain of command and the hitting coach being looped in and then the hitting coach presenting to the player so that the player has the trust of the hitting coach, it's the hitting coach is telling the players something. Now the analytics guy is walking on the field telling the players something. Now they go back and there's a brief in their locker that's telling them something, and it's too many cooks in the kitchen. And hey, look, I mean, I can respect that as a point of view. I mean, Joe Madden may be antiquated in a lot of things, but I kind of feel like when I read this, Raphie, it felt like an unlock to me of what might have been part of the heart of the Melvin Preller concern. Like, here's another guy kind of cut from the same cloth, Madden and Melvin, who both were considered innovative skippers the previous decade and are arguing about not the information, but the way the information is starting to take over the process of coaching a team.
It's all part of the larger trend in baseball of the dwindling importance of the manager. I think that it's been universally recognized over the last 20 years that we just don't look at managers the same way as we did because of all of the information that we have. Now, the issue is that there's two ways to handle that, which is there's a respectful way and there's a disrespectful way. And the respectful way, I think we've seen, and I'm just going to bring them up. I know we constantly bring them up on this podcast, but somewhere like LA, where I don't think anyone who's a Dodgers fan is like necessarily like stoked on Dave Roberts, where they're like, Dave Roberts is the greatest manager. I've seen plenty of Dodgers fans call for Dave Roberts to be fired because of their continued lack of postseason success, but he's never going to be fired because he knows his role in the pecking order. And also, Andrew Friedman has a certain amount of respect for what Dave Roberts does, I believe, which Dave Roberts knows he's the vibes guy. He's the tone setter. And so because he is the tone setter, Andrew Friedman knows he cannot be that guy. He cannot be in the dugout every day with those guys doing it. So he, in some ways, he needs someone like Dave Roberts, but also unquestionably, Dave Roberts is going to pull the pitcher out of the game when the spreadsheet tells him to do it. You know what I mean? There's now also a disrespectful way of handling that, which is AJ Preller and him basically not only saying through, kind of 30,000 foot view that he doesn't really think the manager's all that important, but also through his direct actions by constantly micromanaging and having no respect for the role that the manager does serve in the modern game, which is the vibe setting, which is the translation of information from the front office to the players. And so if you don't, I think you can acknowledge what the role of the manager is in the food chain while also having respect for it as a general manager, president of baseball ops, whatever. It's just clear that AJ doesn't really have the respect. And all the reporting says that he just thinks he can do everything the best himself.
I think he does. I think that's why he hired Bob Melvin. I don't think you go out and get a respected guy with 2 Manager of the Year awards if you don't respect the position to an extent. Let's talk about Joe Maddon. He's been bitching the exact same way about how his tenure with the Angels ended. Basically, after the day after it happened, he gave an interview that was very similar to this quote, literally 24 hours after he got fired. And he got fired after shaving his head, I want to say. Like, he didn't even have time. He was going to be the vibes guy to the point that he shaved his head so that he would walk in the clubhouse being like, look, guys, I shaved my head. And somebody showed up from the team to tell him, no, you're not. Phil Nevin is now the manager. So, like, Joe Maddon, you want to talk about friggin' chips on the shoulder and agendas at play. And you want to talk about managers that might have a little too much of a self-importance complex for today's game. Joe Maddon is that. I don't think Bob Melvin is that. I think he's adapted to the modern game pretty well. He seems to have much more a Bruce Bochy vibe with him. The front office does their thing. I do my thing. I'm not sure that AJ Manager was micromanaging on an in-game level. I don't think AJ Preller was sending Bob bullpen orders. I've never got that at all. What I think Bob Melvin's big complaint with AJ is style and probably just the job he did and like theories on how a roster should be built. Look at Matt Carpenter. Perry Manassian was Joe Maddon's boss. Perry Manassian hasn't come from one of these sabermetrics analytics driven orgs. He comes from the Alex Anthopoulos scouting base, build a team that's economical and reasonable, and that's how you do it. So there is a change in how managers go right now. And I don't think AJ Preller is going to be the best at adapting to that, just because he seems to have an idea of how one should dedicate themselves to winning a championship a little bit different than people who have played baseball their entire lives and then gone on to be the field general of a team.
Yeah, I just have a fundamental different understanding of why Bob Melvin was brought in than you, Chris, or in my, which is that I had interpreted it as, hey, I'm AJ Preller. I've hired 3 managers. They haven't worked out. So I now need to bring in someone who has respect so that I can gain credibility and extend my role in this position. And I thought that the implication when Bob Melvin was hired, to a certain extent, was that Bob and AJ's fortunes were tied to one another. And if Bob Melvin didn't work out, that was like AJ's last best hire. And he was basically brought in desperation.
I'm with you there. Like it seemed all this season that it was going to be an either or, right? Or both, right? I think I was in the same place, but I also think that it comes from a legitimate place of learning to an extent. Like GMs change their performance the same way players do. It's not based on their health or their body, but it's based on experience. And I think going from Andy Green to Jace Tingler, what's the exact opposite of that spectrum? It's somebody with loads of experience and who has been around a lot. And I'll always think this came down to personality. And AJ's personality is extremely set and it's not fluid. And that's why we hear he has trouble working with folks and why he surrounds himself with sycophants or voice that are locked-minded, because he has this personality that I wouldn't want to get calls at 3 a.m. And I'm sure there's very few managers who have egos and have careers and resumes that want to, that want to put up with that want to be treated not like children, but like subjects.
Well, and I think in retrospect, when you put this filter on it, it makes the Andy Green and the Jace Tingler hires so much more understandable, and it gives you a filter for this next hire too, because the whole article Acee wrote about, here's where Preller and Melvin's philosophies are different, and here's what AJ, basically reciting everything AJ said in his Wednesday Zoom. The thing you take away from that is, Preller is saying to these guys in meetings, hey, listen, I'm that guy. I'm going to go to Denny's after the game and I'm going to eat and I'm going to think about it. And then I'm going to text you at 3 and then I'm going to go play basketball. And, I'm all in 24/7, 365. Like, he says things that probably other people have heard as bromides, as just old saws. Hey, I'm 24/7, 365. If you're working for me, you're working for, we're going all the time because we have one goal, and that's to win the championship. And Andy Green's like, hell yeah, I'm in. I'm the same guy. When we lose, I can't stand it. I stay up all night. I rewatch the film. I do this, I do that. And Jace Tingler's like, yeah, bro, anything you need, man. I'm ready to go. I'm here to go with you. You go hard, I go harder. And Bob's like, yeah, we're all here to win. Yeah. But when it comes to actually taking that text at 3, he's going to fucking answer it after he has his eggs at 9.
Oatmeal. He has oatmeal, and Craig.
Or maybe when he gets back to the... What's that?
He has oatmeal with raisins or pecans. He's not eating cholesterol-laden eggs. Come on.
That's smart. Yeah, long season. You're right.
AJ's having a friggin' Monster Energy drink.
So, I mean, I see that as very understandable and also very scary, because I think Ryan Flaherty's going to tell him to F off, frankly. Mike Shildt might be at the point where he just wants a job so bad that he's like, cool, man, whatever you want. It seems like he's played the politics game to get rehired pretty well. And if he gets rehired, I think we're all going to rally around Mike Shildt, to be very honest with you, and hope that he's kind of like a Walmart Showalter.
And really, that might be our betraying Jesus, is getting behind Mike Shildt. I've already felt myself starting to get there. He's a manager of the year. I mean, he turned around a team that was ugly and had front office dysfunction. And since he's left that team, that dysfunction has just come right back. So maybe.
The part where I portray Jesus in terms of Mike Shildt is there's some narrative that was out there about how he really wants to be a baseball lifer. Like, that's what he's into. And they noted that he's unmarried, and he just wants to which is a weird thing. I don't even have a wife. That's how much I love baseball. I'm married to the game. I'm married to the hustle. But also, it goes back to what Tevin was talking about, whenever we had our last group therapy, which was essentially, shouldn't you want someone who is on that same wavelength, just like you were talking about with Andy Green? like to be managing the team. Like, and so if this guy's like, it's AJ and Mike Schilt, it's just two confirmed bachelors just running the Padres. It's like we don't have time for anything else. We're just gonna be in the basement playing OTP, figuring it out together. Maybe that is the best thing for the team. I don't know.
I don't know, man. You just creep me out with the two confirmed bachelors because I'm like, yeah, they're both running. Where else are they running? Where are they? Maybe they're running at night. Maybe that's how they've gotten so close. Maybe that's his wingman. You know, what's with old Schilty by his side? That's where
I think there's some good fan fiction we could be writing. This is where the money actually is. All right,
Monty, can you please get on this for us?
Yes. Which particular club's on the road? I think Preller walks in with an NDA. He just walks into the club with NDAs and starts handing them out. Like, yeah, no, you're going to sign this before we go into the platinum room. Okay.
All right.
Last bit before we get to the get to what's supposed to be the bulk of it. But I'm sorry. I absolutely have to. There was a story in the UT since our last show about the report that was out there somewhere. I forget that the Yankees and I think it was in the Post or something. It was in some New York outlet that the Yankees and the Padres at some point had a preliminary trade discussion about Juan Soto. When? We don't know. For what? We don't know. Lin in his piece said, like GMs never spoke. So what Steinbrenner and Seidler get together a long time ago? What's going on? So Acee writes this piece. And then in the middle of the piece, at the bottom of a paragraph, he just drops a little nuggie. So now quoting again from Acee. Foremost, the Padres plan to trim at least $50 million from their payroll, which could involve their moving left fielder Juan Soto. A report out of New York on Wednesday said the Padres and Yankees have had preliminary discussions about Soto. A Padres source said the sides have not talked this offseason. Two different sources said previously the Yankees were among the teams that expressed interest in Soto before the trade deadline. And it was fairly common knowledge within the organization that Melvin favored trading Soto. What?
Can I want to add a little bit of context that I heard on his podcast. Kevin Acee said that he is very clinical and deliberate about when he releases information. Like he wants to time it to the point where it's pertinent because he doesn't want it to be all about him. He doesn't want to be the story. So he'll hold on to some information and not report it when maybe other people want to win the press conference.
What?
So I literally treat this as the way how Padres Twitter started that Pete Alonso supports ISIS. Like that is like the level of credibility which I give this to, because it's literally, again, this isn't an article. I believe it's the same article talk that the front office quotes are in, right, Craig? It's from the same piece?
Or it could have been the second one. I'm not sure.
Okay. But
I think it was a different one. I think it was a different one. Regardless, all the same writer, all in the same week.
It's literally someone in the front office saying, like, what's the one thing we could say that would turn Padres fans against Bob Melvin the most? Right. Oh, that he wanted to trade He wanted to trade his best player, the only guy who, I think gave a shit at certain points of the season when Ha-Seong Kim was maybe slumping.
Okay, and then let's go on. Let's go ahead and play the game of that means there's an agenda behind it. But what are you trying to accomplish by planting this information? Are you saying, well, now we're not trading Juan Soto because the loudest voice advocating that is now out of the organization, so now we definitely don't want to? Or is this kind of like even the guy that we've left wanted to do? I do not understand if Kevin Acee is so deliberate about when he releases information, why this is here. It blows my friggin' mind. I can't even begin to speculate on it.
I have to dig into the micro of this. Okay. So I'm going to start with the fact that this sentence starts with the word "and." I was taught in high school you never start a sentence with the word "and." That's the wrong thing to do. That's conversational, but that is not proper written English. So this is the last sentence of a paragraph. It starts with the word "and." The next 4 words, it was 5. It was fairly common knowledge. It was fairly common knowledge within the organization. It was fairly common knowledge within the organization. Common knowledge. So that's something everyone knows, right?
Fairly. Fairly.
Fairly.
Craig.
So, fairly common knowledge. So a lot of the people, many
30
of
to
the
70%. Fairly.
Some plurality to majority subsection of people knew that Bob Melvin wanted to trade Juan Soto. And the first time that we ever hear about it is in the last sentence of a paragraph halfway into a story that's really working off someone else's story that starts with the word and is fairly what are you doing? If this is a story, if at the trade deadline when the team was struggling and the question was buy or sell, if the manager was saying to the general manager, we need to sell this guy. You know how we're going to win? Get rid of Juan Soto. And I'll tell you why. XYZ, right? Like, if that's a real thing that happened, man, that's a huge story. I want to know every part of that. Why does Bob Melvin not think Juan Soto is part of a winning team? Why does he want Juan Soto to be traded? What are the specific reasons why?
What 3 a.m. text trade proposal was he given that incited this belief?
Yeah. It's laid the other way. Like Bob Melvin's never coming up with ideas. Then it's like, oh, but it's fairly common knowledge he wanted to trade Juan Soto. What? Like, this is bad, man. I'm sorry. Like, Kevin, I got a ton of respect for you. Like, this is bad. This is bad. You either had a story that you sat on and squashed, in which case you should have kept it squashed and only told your buddies over beers. Hey, by the way, Melvin wanted to trade. Hey, you got to know this and that and the other thing. But to throw it in is just, it reminded me like Jennifer Jason Leigh, Miss Parker, like in the salon. Oh, by the way, it was fairly common knowledge. Everybody knew Bob Melvin wanted to trade Juan Soto, by the way. Oh, you didn't know? It was fairly common knowledge. Yes. Like, I just don't understand. Honest to God, I don't understand. And I think he's done a great job covering the team this year. But this is like, I don't get it. That's not one line. That's a story, man. That's C1. Is Bob Melvin wanted to trade Juan Soto. Let's report this out. You can't put it in as here. Like, it's literally written as hearsay.
No, when the entire fan base is anxious about losing their best player this offseason because he and others have reported that Major League Baseball is requiring the Padres to lower their payroll, you can't put that in. For a fan base that's on pins of needles, just trying to be optimistic about anything, trying to convince themselves that Mike Schilt is going to turn things around. You can't do it. It sucks.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, it's a story that's absolutely 100% worth reporting at the time, if it's true. If it's something that needs more sourcing, put it in your book and have it be in your book. Like, and that's a great thing in a book that I'd want to pick up and like, if you told me Kevin Acee wrote this big story about AJ Preller, wrote a book, and in it's got this bombshell about the time that Bob Melvin wanted to trade Juan Soto, and it's got quotes and it's got corroboration. Like, I want to read that story, man. That's a great story. That's great reporting. That's what a reporter does. But the thing is, we live in the age of access in exchange for your soul, access in exchange for your practices. And I'm not accusing Kevin Acee of malpractice. I know he thinks he's very clinical about the way he releases this stuff. You said so. You said,
he said so.
Of what he said. Right. I didn't hear, but you told me he said it. That's hearsay. So where was it on this? Where was it on this? If it's a throwaway thing, don't throw it in the article. If it's something that the response to this is, oh, Craig, you're overreacting. It's nothing. Then don't put it in the article. But like, when you put it in the article, it was fairly common knowledge. that makes me feel like the idiot. Like, well, why didn't I know that Bob Melvin wanted to train Juan Soto? It was fairly common knowledge within the organization. Why hasn't it been reported, a half a dozen times by now if it was such fairly common knowledge? Or was this not common knowledge? And now, what is it? I don't understand. I feel dumber having read the sentence because I just don't understand any aspect of it. And by the way, of course, it doesn't matter. Maybe Bob Melvin wanted Juan Soto to be traded to the Giants because he's about to go there.
Pulling
give me just
Anthony
this much
Rizzo
context.
move.
I can make it anything I want. Yeah. Right? Like it's crazy. So I don't know, man. A lot of good stuff, but this was just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. Now for our main topic. After this break. All right, this is what we were going to talk about a week ago. Off season, we're trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of how we get there. Because at the end of the day, we want the Padres to be great again. We want the Padres to be back in the playoffs. And even if that means that we have to deal with another 8 different AJ Preller press conferences that are going to make my brain effectively shrink by a small percentage, we'll deal with the fallout of all of that. To get there, we're going to need pitching. And guys, one of the things about last season that I feel like is the ultimate waste is that AJ Preller put together a pitching staff that was by and large up to the task. And in particular, a starting rotation that the starters, the planned pitchers in the rotation were up to the task. Blake Snell won the Cy Young. Well, he's going to win the Cy Young. Had the best year of his career or the second best year of his career, depending on how you want to look at it. Yu Darvish was a little down. Joe Musgrove was in and out, but Michael Wacha gave you just what you wanted, and Seth Lugo gave you way more than you could have possibly expected. And in the end, the Padres were, I'm right, Raphie, aren't I, a top 10 team?
I thought
when it came to the rotation.
I thought they were top 5 or top 3.
According to Fangraphs, they were the 4th most valuable rotation according to F4. If you want to just do it based on FIP, they were the 6th best starting rotation. From a pure ERA standpoint, they did have literally the lowest ERA by a considerable margin of any starting rotation, a 3.69 ERA as a starting pitching staff. And they were incredibly good at limiting home runs. I mean, that was a big part of why they did it. They were the 2nd lowest home runs per 9 at 1.14. And listen, this isn't going to be a surprise to anyone who watched Blake Snell pitch this season. They did walk a decent amount of guys, but really it was Blake Snell who did like all of the walking, because Blake Snell had a 4.95 walks per 9 ratio. And the second highest after him was Michael Wacha at 2.88. So when I say that the Padres, were the 9th worst in terms of walking guys as a starting staff, like it's just Blake Snell. Everyone else was good to very good. They struck out guys. They were 9th in K per 9. Like, again, it's like all of the metrics are fantastic. They left the most guys on base percentage wise. When you have that big of a sample, yes, some of that comes down to luck, but a lot of that comes down to having a good defense behind you, generating a good amount of ground balls, a lot of other factors. But any way you cut it, they were a good starting pitching staff, truly.
Okay, so here's the thing. That added up to 82 wins because one of the least clutch teams in history. And offensive dysfunction. And
watch our YouTube channel on Raphie's breakdown of the least clutch team in history.
Absolutely. So now here's the problem. You got to find a way. You don't have to recreate exactly that. You don't have to be 4th best, number 1 ERA, blah, blah, blah. But you've got to match the innings. You've got to match the workload. And you're going to have to do that in a situation where heading out the door, for sure, Blake Snell. I mean, I say for sure. For mostly sure.
For sure.
Blake Snell, Seth Lugo.
Yeah, you don't have to add a caveat there. He's gone.
Dude, I never thought they'd sign Xander Bogaerts this time last year. You know what I mean? Like, just Who knows? Maybe Seidler pops up like the dude in the GIF, on in the coffin that's on the back of the flatbed truck, and just pops up and starts dancing.
Why are you putting Peter Seidler in a coffin, Craig? What are you doing?
Just the GIF. I'm having him dancing on the back of a flatbed truck. That's what I'm having.
Okay.
He was in there for the act. It was all for the GIF. Snell and Lugo gone and likely out the door, not to be replaced. Michael Wacha, we have an option. Nick Martinez, there's an option. Both of those options are a little bit dicey. I think we've discussed in past episodes that we've come around to like Wacha, like probably okay to pick up that option, and Nick Martinez probably should be okay with his $8 million player option. If the Padres decline, but who knows? Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot. Snell and Lugo were 1-2 on the team in innings pitched, were they not? Right?
326 combined, 180 for Blake, 146 for Seth.
Yep. Mr. Reed, I was asking Raphie the question. Just kidding. I'm kidding. You were that kid in class, though, huh?
What kid? The one that had things to say occasionally?
Yes. The number 3 is Wacha. He could be out the door as well.
Darvish had a couple more innings than Wacha.
Okay, so you're right there. Darvish and Wacha.
Yeah.
You're the teacher that was drinking vodka out of his coffee mug.
I was. I came with a guitar, but the guitar had a bit of Fireball in it.
Hey, kid, today we're going to play a video.
And then we're going to play it again.
Yeah.
Tell me the differences. Never. Right. Okay. So we got to figure out how to get from here to there. And there are 2 players that we know will be on the San Diego Padres next year. That's Yu Darvish. That's it. Everyone else, no, for this rotation. We know Tatis will be there, and if he can give us 120 strong, then we're in great shape.
Good.
I mean, if we have an Ohtani in our mix, let's do it. So let's start, Rafe, with Yu Darvish. Where he was, obviously, last year, some injury issues. 2021, some injury issues for Yu Darvish. 2020, 2022, completely healthy. 2020 doesn't count. It was a mini season. So what does it look like just statistically in terms of what we should be realistically expecting from Yu Darvish in 2024?
So I did this for Darvish, Musgrove, and Wacha, so I'll get to them in order. But I basically just took their innings counts from their careers. I took out 2020 for obvious reasons because that'll fuck up the sample. And for Darvish, I also took out 2015 because he didn't pitch. He was recovering from Tommy John. And I didn't want to just have a giant 0 in there. So, sue me. It's our show. We're going to do it this way. So 10 seasons that are non-TJ, non-2020 seasons for Yu Darvish in Major League Baseball. He's put up an average of 155 innings in those seasons. And the standard deviation on his totals is 52 innings. It's quite high because in 2018, he only put up 40 innings. In 2016, he only put up 100 innings. And then this season, he only put up 136. So basically the low end, if one standard deviation on either side, the low end of a reasonable outcome for Yu Darvish is a 103 inning season. The high end would be 207 innings. That would be the second most he's thrown in his career. So that's kind of the range we're in. That's a huge range. When we get to Musgrove and Wacha, it won't be that big. But Darvish for me is the biggest unknown. Like he's not only because the data says he's the biggest unknown, he has the biggest range, but also because he could be totally healthy by spring training and we can be great, or he could literally need elbow surgery and be out the entire year. So
isn't he having elbow surgery?
He had, but I think very, very minor. I'm talking something more significant.
Yeah.
He's not scheduled to miss time, is what I'm saying. Is what I'm saying now. He could soon, we could soon find out that he could be scheduled to miss time. So Darvish is for sure the biggest question mark for me going forward.
He's also the one guy that you have to have I mean, I think these next two guys, Darvish and Musgrove, you have to have them operating at least their 80th percentile, if not higher. But Chris, if I was going to put an optimistic case together for you, it would go something like this. Going to lean on a crutch. I accept that I'm leaning on it right away, but instead, this is a guy that's all about routine. This is a guy who is all about a meticulous plan that he's worked on and crafted since he was a teenager to now in his late 30s. And last year, his routine was completely cattywampus. He started in Japan early in a camp, ramping up as if he was going to be a starter. Then he got over to America for just an eye blink. And then it's into the World Baseball Classic. And is he a starter? No. He gets his first outing that would be kind of the equivalent of a regular first outing in spring training. Everything else is out of the bullpen. He's sparingly used. He never ramps up. Then he has to take a little time to ramp up before the start of the season. He took 4 or 5 days or whatever. And then he came into the rotation, and maybe he was never quite exactly right. Like, he found his rhythm at one point in the year, then he's lost it somewhere in there. He gets a little bit hurt. It reminds me of 2021. Like, if this guy stays healthy, he's still really, really good. He's still creative. He's a physical presence. That's one thing about you, Darvish. Like, he is a huge man. He is a real physical specimen. He's not as breakdownable as someone else. That's not a word. He's not as fragile as someone else. There's a reason that betting on him wasn't a completely ridiculous bet for the end of his career. So if he's not nagged by something and he has his whole off season to get back and he has a regular routine, I kind of feel like we could put 170 innings down as a reasonable number to get from you, Darvish, and hope that he goes past it and approaches 200.
Yeah, if it's 160, I'm definitely betting the over, just to put it in layman's terms, right? And like you alluded to, there's lots of reasons to kind of write off 2023, especially when it comes to his innings total, as just being a little bit anomalous and outside of what you should expect for you. With the reasons you mentioned, World Baseball Classic, not getting his starting position locked in, and his normal preparation nowhere near a normal spring training. And also, you said it, Craig, Mr. Darvish is a meticulous routine guy. Pitch clock. First time in his career he's ever had to deal with that. So there are a lot of factors that would lead me to dismiss 2023 as what you would expect from him going forward. His resume is robust. He has a track record that the Padres felt was sufficient enough to make the long-term investment. I cheerleaded the long-term investment. I think he's a great guy to have around. And yeah, man, 170, yeah, you's going to do that as long as we hear good news about this elbow.
I am going to take the counter position and just say only for the sake of, as people have noted, pitchers don't have an aging curve. They tend to fall off a cliff at some point. And what I will say is I don't think that that's what's happening to you, Darvish, right now, that he's falling off the cliff right now. I would just say that as someone who is currently 37 years old and is going to be turning 38 in August of 2024, we're not going to just see a magical resurgence, I think, of anything that we've seen before. I think we're going to start seeing that decline until one day, probably in 2026 or 2027, he falls off the cliff. And then, which, by the way, the Padres will still be paying for his extension at that point. So I think if 160 is the line, I think that if I were betting, I'd say he'd go just under that. Maybe like 150, like mid 150s, high 150s, as my most probable outcome, just because I think that this injury is so unknown and we're so obfuscated by, the Padres clinically being incapable of telling the truth when it comes to injuries.
Raphie, this was a big boy frame conversation. I'm sorry, but I can relate more to you in this regard, and my shoulders are falling off.
Okay, so somewhere in there, all right, 150 to 170 innings is what we think we can either conservatively to liberally expect from Yu Darvish, with a chance, of course, for him to either get injured and give you nothing, which we can always say about anyone, or because he is Yu Darvish, for him to push for another classical year. Go look at Burt Blyleven's career and all the number of good years he had in his late. Like, there's big guys who are incredible can pitch later in their careers. He's had a lot of mileage, but he also could keep going. So I don't know. Let's talk about that. Let's move the slide, so to speak, to Joe Musgrove, because on one level, I'd say I should be less concerned about Joe Musgrove. Like, Joe Musgrove is much younger. He's very much in the heart of his career. And of anyone who needs to write off a year, it's Joe Musgrove in 2023, from kettlebell to rehab start, crank your shoulder, to burn your feet in Mexico. Like, everything that could go wrong for Joe Musgrove went wrong this year. And before his shoulder started hurting, he was pitching great. However, all that other shit is why his shoulders started hurting. So, Raphie, I feel like this one is kind of a leap of faith situation. You have to believe that the story we've been told is true, essentially. And Occam's razor, which I already talked about, allows me to do this, to point at all the things that happened this season and say these things led him to the verge of getting hurt, but they shut him down at the right time. And now he's going to be able to come back without his toe hurting, without his, back to his proper mechanics, and with a full off season of rest. He should come back and be himself next year.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I do want to point out that not too long ago, you were saying it's 50-50 that Joe Musgrove doesn't play for the Padres at all in 2024.
It's a shoulder. I mean, I don't know. None of us know anything. I'm saying if you take that at its face value, just first he hurt his toe, then he tweaked his shoulder coming back. Then he was adjusting for the toe as he was pitching. He got to a spot that it worked for him. He was super successful in doing that. He torqued his shoulder a little bit. They shut him down at the right time. Like, if you take that, then you can accept he can come back and he can be a 100%, 180 inning Joe Musgrove in 2024.
Yeah, so over the course of his 6 full seasons in MLB, he's had 149 innings on average. Obviously, this year and his first year in 2017, when he wasn't quite a fully formed product yet, kind of dragged that total down. That's a standard deviation of 37 innings. So on the low end, that puts us around the 112 inning range. On the high end, that puts us at 186, which would be a career high. 2021 is currently his career high at 181 in the third innings. And he's someone who I think if he's healthy, he can absolutely hit that mark. He hit it in 2021, and in 2022, he had almost exactly the same amount of innings pitched. So if the shoulder, I feel there are less question marks with Joe Musgrove than with Yu Darvish, because Joe's in the prime of his career. He's kind of a known entity. He's definitely someone who's going to work hard and be out there if he physically at all can pitch. So, if we are taking everything that's being provided to us on face value, yes, I would say you could pencil in Joe Musgrove for at least 170 innings next year.
Well, 2018 was his second year as a full-time starter, and he missed time with a bad shoulder. And that's what he's battling right now, is that shoulder capsule information. But like you said, Raphie, every other time it's 170 innings plus. He's been posting workout videos famously or somewhat infamously on his Instagram. Dude does look fit. We know he's going to put in the work. So if dude's healthy, I would expect a career year. I would expect, like, if we're doing our season predictions, and it's February 22nd, and Joe Musgrove has a clear bill of health, I'm gonna predict more innings than he's ever pitched in his life.
I'm just going to be really simple and draw a red line right here before we get to anyone else with these two players. If Joe Musgrove can't deliver a full quality season for the Padres in 2024, and Yu Darvish can't deliver a full quality season for the Padres in 2024, the Padres are not going to be good in 2024. Like, it's pretty hard as we continue down this equation to get from here to there if the first two variables fail. Like, it's pretty hard to get from to where we need to get, which is over 800 innings pitched from the starting rotation, if the first two guys, the only two guys that you can quote unquote count on, are not going to be a part, not going to be a significant part, carrying the load, doing the heavy lifting in this equation. So, take it for what you want. If you want to say Joe Musgrove is going to have a bad shoulder and he's not going to succeed, that was me 3 weeks ago. Hey, me 3 weeks ago. If you want to say that, you're probably just saying the Padres aren't going to have a good year next year. So take it for what it is. To me, it's like it's in the bucket of it's got to be. Like it's got to be this way. Musgrove has got to be healthy. Darvish has got to be healthy and productive. They've got to live up as the numbers 3 and 4 starters that are masquerading as number 1 and 2 starters in our rotation for us to have kind of like any chance. Now let's get to Michael Wacha, because I feel like Michael Wacha too, Raphie, has developed a pretty standard line in terms of what you should be able to expect from him if you bring him back next year.
Yeah, Michael Wacha, again, taking out 2020, he's had 9 seasons in which he's averaged 132 innings. His standard deviation is 29 innings. So again, that's the lowest of the 3 because he's incredibly consistent. His, he posted 181 innings in 2015 and 165 and 2/3 in 2017. But other than that, like the last 4 years, his line has been 126 and 2/3, 124 and 2/3, 127 and 1/3, 134 and 1/3. So I think it's pretty safe to say that if you sign Michael Wacha, you can pencil him in for 120 innings next year at least. I think you can count on that with upside for more. So I think I'd probably take the over on that, frankly. Not by much though. His if you go one standard deviation in either direction, his low end is 103 and his high end is 161. So it's not very likely that he's going to push more than 160 innings. So if you get $140 out of him, that's awesome. But 120 is my kind of line.
And that becomes like a question of, is that worth the $16 million this year and next, right? And you guys know my opinion. Everybody listening does. Spot Track, people who are much better at it than I am, put his average annual value at about 18 million. And if you're a team looking at your 2 top guys in Darvish and Musgrove having big question marks hanging over your head, I think Wacha becomes even a little bit more valuable. That 18 million is a little bit of, that's to your basic everyday team. If you're the team holding the contract and the decision, that option, I'm going right back to where I was in May, but it's looking like that option is becoming an easy decision on the pickup. Yeah.
I think when you factor in, well, if not him, then who? Then, and we're going to kind of go down that road here momentarily. It gets really cloudy really quick. But
what are we at total innings wise now already?
I was just going to say, if you just want to kind of go there, if you put Darvish at 160, which was in between our 150 and our 170, if you put, let's just put Musgrove at the same thing, just to mix in a little bit of uncertainty there, right? That gets you to 320. And then if you put another 120 on top of that for Michael Wacha, you get to 440 innings. Now, last year, the Padres starting rotation, Raphie did this research before the show, 863 innings pitched from starters, and that was 9th best in Major League Baseball. Now, the best was Seattle, and they were just over 900. So the old thing about getting 1,000 innings from your rotation, like, that's 100 innings away from being true in modern baseball. So like 850 innings I think it was like 830 was the average. I think it was. I got to go back to
832. I think was the average.
Yeah, 832.
Yeah.
So anything around there, 850, 830, that's a normal starting rotation. That's not destroying your bullpen in the modern game. Given two guys that we put in a bucket of, well, we're kind of effed if they don't do it, and one guy we're just kind of giving him his normal mark. We're at 440. So, we're halfway to 850. We've got 2 spots left in the rotation. So we better sign Phil and Joe Niekro. Come on down. 240 innings each, and we've solved the problem.
Probably pitch still, right? He's still there.
Well, I think you have to look at it this way. Your 4 spot has to go to a back end workhorse, and your 5 spot is some combination of Waldron, Avila, like any of the other guys that are kind of simmering in AAA. I mean, I don't know, Jake Groom, like. I know we're just kind of throwing shit at the wall here, but like, A, you're not going to have the money to bring someone else in based on all the reporting that we've heard so far. And B, I don't really think that you have another choice other than having some of these guys kind of simmer up from El Paso.
I'll just go ahead and say they are fucked if that's their 5. Like that needs to be their 6 option. And I know the payroll limitations as good as anyone. Our wonderkind GM has been known to make some exceptional trades in the offseason for starting pitching. So that is going to be the key. That number 5 spot cannot be Matt Waldron, Jay Groom, and Pedro Avila on a rotation. Like maybe one of them picking up that 5th spot, but we're in the same boat, man. They need 2 starters, just like they did last year.
Well, we've skipped a guy. We skipped Nick Martinez.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So Nick Martinez last year gave the Padres 100 innings?
Yeah, and like 44 as a starter. Yeah.
Okay. So gave them a lot of bulk relief, and then at the end of the year and the very beginning of the year gave them some starting rotation time. $16 million for the next 2 years is a lot for Nick Martinez. But at the same time, the Padres need his innings. And it's a difficult situation to say that the right path is to play hardball with Nick Martinez, poker face him, say that you're not going to pick up the team option, count on him not to get a better offer or not to feel spurned by the team option not being picked up after he was such a team player each of the last 2 years, vaulting back and forth from the bullpen and the starting rotation. Count on some other organization not giving him a 3-year deal as a guaranteed starter to come in, that he's going to pick up that player option. And then when all of that when you get through all of that, to actually use him as the starter that you might have paid him $16 million for if he comes in and throws 150 innings, and or 125 innings and does the job as a starting pitcher next year. It's a sticky wicket. And the only simple way to solve it is to just pick up his options. And that's a little more than we want to spend on Nick Martinez. It also makes you have to put him in the starting rotation.
Well, it's way more because his player option is $8 million, right? And isn't the team option
16?
Team option's the same as Waka. Yeah,
same as Waka.
We're not gonna give that to him. And by the way, Nick Martinez, even dating back to his run with the Rangers before he spent significant time in Japan, his highest innings he ever threw was 140 and a third in a season. And he wasn't good. Like you had to go to Japan. I mean, he wasn't good. So the last 2 seasons with the Padres, he's thrown 106 and a third and 110 and a third. I think even if everything goes his way and he comes in and he's a starter and he's healthy and he doesn't miss time, I think it's not realistic to expect more than 130 from him. Like
sure.
to count on that, because that would be the most he's thrown in almost a decade. So I don't know.
Let me just do a devil's advocate type thing, or just it sprung into my head. When we say Nick Martinez for 2 years, $32 million, I'm like, wait, I would offer Seth Lugo 2 years and $32 million as a free agent to come back to my team. But now let's say that I did that, and then I did sign Seth Lugo to a 2-year, $32 million deal. wouldn't we be arguing that his likely starting pitching innings load would be around 130 because he got to a high number last year, and the likelihood of him taking an injury next year would be high enough that we'd have to bake that into the projection. And so we'd probably park him at a number not higher than what he had thrown before. So
sure,
like,
if not lower,
right? So when you go down that road, then Martinez almost starts to make a little bit more sense in terms of the in-house, close to us, financially certain available options. The question then becomes, okay, so let's be optimistic. We were at 440 as a very reasonable number for 3 spots. Let's just say Nick Martinez exercises his player option, is in the starting rotation, and we'll give him 120 innings to be fair. Again, right now we're at 560, right? We're at 560. How many innings can we possibly assign to Waldron and Avila next year? 100? 100 combined?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what comes to my mind. Yes.
That's a best case scenario.
Yes, correct.
I mean,
660.
That's Avila being a guy for March through June, you know.
No, if they each get 50 innings, that means that they both filled in at some point for 6 to 8 starts, right?
I'm not positive Matt Waldron's going to be able to last, but yeah, we saw him do it, so let's say he can.
Matt Waldron started 6 times this year and threw 31 2/3 innings, and Pedro Avila started also 6 times this year and threw 25 2/3 innings.
Oof.
So
okay, so we're talking about less than 5 innings a start.
Well,
so
that's
we should probably ramp that
been
down
a reliever,
to 80.
You know, like he did have to.
This is just as a starting pitcher. This is just as a starting pitcher. These stats.
Right. Well, where has he been career wise as a being a starter the whole year, like even to the minors?
Who, Matt Waldron? He can't have in the minors. They never let you pitch more than 5 these days. So I feel like those numbers get artificially capped anyhow. It's not like the old days where you could throw 230 innings in the minor leagues.
Well, I got it. He's done 130 innings in the minors, years and years ago. But that was when he was a built-up full-time starter, and it's been a minute since he's had that.
So, go ahead. Sorry, I was just going to say Avila has in 2022 he started 24 games in El Paso. He threw 112 innings, and in 2023 he started 15 games in El Paso and threw 55 2/3. So he's not. There's no length there. No. That includes the 55 2/3 includes 4 relief appearances as well.
Okay, I'm cutting 10 off of each guy. Let's give 40 innings to each guy. All right. So that brings us to 640.
So we're at 640. Yes.
We're at 640 innings.
Still need 210 innings from someone.
210 innings away from last year's starting rotation contribution. Okay, what have we just learned with this quick and dirty math equation on the back of a napkin? We've learned that you can't do it with this group.
Yeah, two guys.
You cannot get there with this group of guys. The Padres must go outside the organization in order to fulfill the starting rotation to get to a number that will allow them to compete in 2024. So that brings us to what can they afford to pick up in a trade? What can they afford to pick up in free agency? And it's different affordability. Free agency is fighting against debt reduction and, a payroll that is already mostly committed. That's the one thing when everyone goes, well, with a $200 million payroll, you should be able to compete. We're dealing with most of that payroll going to 6 dudes or 7. And then it's how do you fill out the rest of the entire roster at 60 million, in order to get there. So I'm sorry. We do this thought exercise and it just brings me to the reports out of the Arizona Fall League about how well Jacob Marcy and Graham Pauley are hitting. and that these dudes are future someone else's. That they're either going to go for Shane Bieber or for Corbin Burns or for some pitcher that's out there that could be acquired for top prospects out of the hot lava pod, or the hot lava that's bubbling up out of the system again.
Yeah, like that's and you nailed it. Corbin Burns is in his last year of ARB. That's what they're going to be targeting. Somebody who is not at a free market salary for top market prospects. And we're going to lose guys we don't want to under this path.
Is there another way to do it, Rafe?
Yeah, there is. There's the nuclear option, which I don't want them to take because I think it makes the team worse, but it's that they trade Juan Soto. That's going to get you multiple. You could get good pre-arb arms that will be with the team sheet for a while by trading Juan Soto. At least, obviously, you could get one really good arm, or you could get a couple guys that maybe the team determines that that's where the best use of our resources is. I don't agree with it, especially because. Again, if you watch the clutch video, you talk about the offense. This is an offense that is going to be better next year. I know it will be, just by the fact that this was truly not, you couldn't even say a first percentile. It was like a 0.0001 percentile outcome for this offense this year. Historically unlucky. And just by virtue of keeping the offensive unit together, the team will be better next year in that respect. It's just basically how much performance can you retain from the pitching staff that will allow you to, that will be there to take any hit, basically, of, we're going to get better on offense. I'm saying this poorly. We're going to get better on offense. How much worse can our pitching get is what I'm trying to say for us to still be successful. And that's the question around this.
How we get to any of these things without trading Juan Soto. I mean, I think so many of these things we're going to get to thought exercises where, if you traded Juan Soto, winds up being a viable solution. And if they're doing the same thing,
the team just works. It's just a worse team. Like, I don't believe that you can make the 2024 team better and trade Juan Soto. I do not see it at all. And so if the goal is to win in 2024, you have to keep Juan Soto. And so therefore you have to do what? Black magic to make the rotation work? Like,
you've got to gut your farm system that you've just built back up to trade for Juan Soto, or you have to spend money.
Correct. No, correct. Right. ABC, right? If it's not going to be Soto, it's got to be one of the other two things. Or else you're telling us that Pedro Avila is actually good for 130 innings in the major leagues next year, pitching just like he did for 30 innings. And that Matt Waldron is actually R.A. Dickey and just he's needed time to develop, but now he's going to come out and have a Cy Young season. And he's going to throw 200 innings of way above average ball because he's R.A. Dickey. Like, it's ridiculous. Jay Groom is going to come out of nowhere, and he's going to throw 112 innings for the team.
We need somebody to make up those Blake Snell walks, Craig.
Yep.
Yeah. Or, hey, I'll throw another thing out there. Non-roster invitee. So go pick your favorite
Cole
hardship
Hamels?
case. Right, exactly. The Summer of Cole, Part 2. Let's try again. Pick whoever has just washed out. Pick someone who's just gotten bombed out of the league. Rich Hill. Like
we're climbing Dig Mountain again, boys.
Absolutely. If you want to tell me that this is how the Padres can patchwork it to get to 850 innings, or that they're going to spend a whole bunch of money on their bullpen and they're going to count on throwing 780 innings next year, but having the bullpen, pick up the slack because they're going to put a big investment into that. Like, I don't know.
Can I give a free agent name that is not like hot stove, but it's a name that I've said before and is now we don't have to trade for him because he's a free agent and he's a profile that fits with the Padres?
Who dat?
Brad Keller, Kansas City, famously the guy who broke Manny Machado's hand
Perfect.
It's going to make for an awkward conversation, but this guy puts up 130 innings every single year. I feel like he's the type of guy that Ruben Niebla could fix. Spot Track has him making less than $4 million annually, which means it's probably just going to be a 1-year prove-it deal. That's the type of guy I need, and that's the name I have for this type of person because the market doesn't have a lot of these guys on the market. He's the youngest available free agent starter. He's been in the league the longest as a young man. So that's what... If I'm looking at the options and it's trade Juan Soto or take a risk on a guy who might have a 5.5 ERA, but get me those 130 innings, that's the option I'm going with, man. And I'm hoping that Juan Soto makes up the difference offensively.
I'm never going to pitch my fork down into the salad until I know exactly what I'm eating. So I don't know what we're trading for. So I'm not going to say we should trade for or against. If the next Julio Rodriguez is waiting and we could trade Juan Soto for him, I would say let's do that.
What about Julio Urias, noted free agent?
I think pass. I think maybe pass. Yeah. I mean, he'd provide some innings. Well, yeah. For that matter, Trevor Bauer is available. Should we go sign Trevor Bauer
and Mike Clevenger? All of we can have the triumvirate of just sick.
There you go. The Nasty Boys.
The Nasty Boys coming to Petco.
I don't like this. This is dumb.
This is dumb.
Hey, Jake Arrieta's sitting on a lazy boy somewhere. He's been just marinating. Like we're waiting for that shot. He's waiting for a call either from a general manager or for January 6th part 2. So it's one or the other. He's either going to be storming Peoria or a pizza restaurant outside Washington, D.C. So what's it going to be?
This is where we're at, Raphie. We need those innings. There's 200 of them.
There they are. There they all are. Okay, let's end it there. Let's put a pin in it. I think a trade's coming. Bottom line, I think a trade's coming in the offseason. I think we're going to have to gobble up saying those old things again. They're all suspects. None of them are prospects. Look at the Snell trade. Look at the Musgrove trade. Look at the Darvish trade. We would do every one of those trades again. Why wouldn't we repeat the process? Why wouldn't we keep it going? And honestly, who other than Bednar out of those trades would have been on our team at any point the last 3 years? Owen Casey wouldn't have. There wasn't a single person in the Cubs trade that would have. In the Tampa trade, they might
them all.
They might start to get some dividends from that. So there's plenty of trades that make plenty of sense that add absolute value, but they will cripple the depth of the organization. They will force the team to stock the back half of the roster with the Rougned Odors of the world, the non-roster invitees, the quad A guys, the aging veterans, the NBA roster minimums, so to speak. And that's the price you pay if you don't break the cycle. This is why we did the How Do You Break the Cycle Without Breaking the Window podcast. The number one answer was spend through it. So if you can't spend through it, it's a really there's two other ways to go. You either don't break the cycle or you do it the hard way, which is by chewing through a year of really bad starting pitching, like just not having it. And we don't have, that's the last thing I guess I wanted to, have we completely ignored the farm system? Is there a number of innings pitched that we should assign to up and coming players?
I'm terrified by all of them because the guys that you want that have the stuff and the pedigree are too young. They're too raw, and you don't want to launch them in unless they come into the spring. But yeah, we've seen some guys come straight from college though. If Dylan Lesko's fully healthy, Lesko's the guy out of college and Snelling's the high school kid, right?
I Snelling and Lesko are both high school guys.
Oh, then never mind.
Yeah, Mazer's a college guy.
Mazer, there it is.
College guy.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, could Adam Mazer throw 70 innings for the San Diego 70? Padres next year? Probably not.
But we're seeing it. We're seeing it happen all around baseball. These young 22, 23-year-old pitchers come up and not be amazing, but at least contribute to that innings load.
Yeah, I mean, Adam Mazer only threw, let's see, how many innings did he throw? 58 plus 30. He threw 96 innings last year across 2 levels of baseball. So that would require him, starting the year maybe in El Paso, which he's never performed at before, throwing, a month there, performing well, and then coming up and spending the rest of the team, bits and pieces of the team or the season with the team, basically.
Just never send anybody to El Paso. El Paso's horrible. What pitcher is
the use of the usefulness of El Paso baseball? Sure.
Yeah, man. Nobody's come from there and done anything. I do want to circle back just to finish up and ask you a question, Craig, because our beloved patron, Dr. Cosmo, did put in the Discord. How you feeling about Joe Madden as the manager?
No, thank you. Hey, 6 years ago, he was, or maybe 10 years ago, he was the cat's meow. Honestly, I could never get over the way he managed Game 6 and 7 of the World Series. Same. When the Cubs won it. He was so bad. I was screaming at the television and screaming. The bunt, the Baez, oh my God. Just kill me now. So I feel like Joe Madden's long jumped the shark. Bob Melvin was the guy I wanted for the veteran managerial archetype. Beyond that, Buck Showalter. Because for 1 year, he whips the whippersnappers into shape. And if there was one guy that would magically conjure 80 innings out of some random-ass pitcher that I'd never heard of, it'd probably be a guy like that. But we're going to get Mike Schilt, and we're all going to love him. And we're going to believe in him. We'll believe in the Schilt. We'll all have Schilt sandwiches, and we'll eat them with smiles on our faces. He's got a sandwich in St. Louis. It's one of the best delis, the Schilt sandwich.
I did not know that. I will look it up, and
I just made it up, but I'm sure it could
be true. Coming soon to Chiba Hut.
Oh man, to the cheese shop down in the La Jolla Cove, the Schilt sandwich. Oh. Who knows? Okay, this has been Padres Hot Tub. We've gotten into some very bad things at the end, and we'll try and do better next time.
Thank you to the 7 of you who listened to the end of the show. I really appreciate that.
Bye-bye now.